Well guys, we're just out doing a little morning scout here before the deer season starts in southeast Saskatchewan, and if you watched one of my previous videos, you'll hear me talk about the moose in this area and how we see more moose than deer. And here we have a nice little bull moose and a couple cows out in the distance there. Not too scared of people in this area. They don't get hunted very much, and I always love seeing these guys running around. Again, like I said, always see more moose than deer, and saw a few deer this morning on our drive, but there again there's three more moose, one pretty decent bull by the looks of it out there. I don't know if we'll get close enough to see him before he takes off, but they're just not scared of us driving around, and we can get fairly close to these guys, although I wouldn't want to try it on foot. Just came across a nice little rub here from whitetail. This is going to be an area that we want to watch. There's some beds right here too. Probably a buck line somewhere, around this area. We'll keep an eye on this spot. Got some freezing rain here this morning. It's supposed to be turning into snow. We are going to get into the shop today. Pull the Bronco out that we've been working on while we wait for parts to come for that. And we got a 78 Ford half-ton that we're going to probably end up pulling the transmission out of. We built a new motor, put a set of clutches in the transmission, and something is seized. And here we got a whitetail running there right now. Something is seized, and we believe it's the transmission pump that's stuck on it. We're going to pull that apart today and see what's going on. Maybe we'll see if we can get a little closer to that deer too. So this is the truck we're going to bring in today. As I was saying, the transmission, we believe, the pump is seized on it. The motor won't turn over, but the motor was rebuilt a couple years ago. This truck has been in the family for, well, since 1978 when it was new. It's in really nice shape for the year, so we thought we would keep it around and get her back on the road. And it's been a decent little truck up until this transmission issue, so we're gonna have a go at that today, get it apart, and see what's going on with that while we wait for parts for the 88 Bronco. Well, we got the 78 half-ton in. As you can see, with the ice rain this morning, she's a little frosty. I'll give you a peek under the hood here. It's got a 400 in it. This engine was rebuilt a couple years ago. Put a cam in it, did everything up. It was running really good. Transmission started slipping, and that's why we're pretty sure that's what's going on. It actually got hot enough that it was boiling the water in the rad from the transmission cooler, cooling through there, but the engine wasn't overheating. So we're pretty sure that the pump seized in it, and hopefully that's all it is, and we're not pulling that engine back apart again. But we'll find out shortly here, I guess. Okay guys, we got the truck kind of warmed up here. All the ice melted off of it. Got the back up on some ramps. Some jack stands under the front. Always want to make sure you get everything supported really good when you're going to be working underneath. Wish we had a hoist in this garage, but we don't, so this is how we're going to do her. Before we get started pulling the transmission out, we're just going to do a little diagnosing, double check a few things, see what we can find, and we'll let you know, and we'll get at it here. Well, we threw a wrench on the front crankshaft pulley, and that won't turn at all, so we got the starter out and tried moving the flywheel at the back. Same thing, can't budge it. So we're going to go ahead, take that transmission drive shaft and mount off and get that transmission out of there. See what we can determine when we get that far. Well guys, we got the transmission mount undone. Drive shaft is undone. Again, tape up those caps, keep them on there so they don't fall apart. One thing that you'll run into with these old trucks, old vehicles, these fuel tanks end up getting full or asked if they sit for any amount of time. This back tank we've actually taken out for now, it needs to be replaced. And we were getting so much contamination in the system, and the fuel switch between the two tanks wasn't working. So we actually just unhooked it temporarily and stuck a filter in place of where the switch is, just to have that extra filtering capacity. And that one will plug first before it plugs the one up in the engine. And so once we get this thing going again, we'll be replacing both the tanks and sending units and get that switch replaced and hooked back up properly, and should keep the filters nice and clean. When you pull the drive shaft out of these automatic transmissions, you want to have a pan, because that thing's going to spill a bunch of oil out of the tail shaft. The other issue we're going to have with this thing being that it's stuck and we can't turn it over to undo the torque converter nuts, is we're going to have to leave the torque converter bolted up to the engine, and hopefully there's enough room to slide that transmission off of the torque converter. And once that's off, we'll be able to tell if it's the engine or the transmission that's stuck, and we're pretty sure it's the transmission just by a little bit of testing that we've done. So once the transmission's off, we should be able to turn the engine over and take the torque converter nuts off, and we'll see how this goes here. Okay, well, we got the top bolts out of the transmission housing. We've got linkage and everything undone there. One tool I really like for this job is this long extension. 1/2-inch drive on one end, 3/8 drive on the other. Makes for being very easy to get up there with a small socket around the bell housing bolts, and just makes the job a lot easier. See how tight it is to get up to those bolts up at the bell housing, especially on the passenger side beside the exhaust, and that tool on the impact reaches right up in there, no problem. Small socket gets onto the bolts and easy to take them out. Highly recommend something like that if you're doing any transmission removals. Well, we got everything undone here. We're going to grab a jack, get it underneath, and we'll get this thing lifted up and get the mount out of the way here. It's a little dark, this video's not too great, but get that mount out of the way. It's all undone. Just got to lift the tranny up, slide that mount out, and see if she'll come out with the torque converter bolted to the engine. Well, we're back at it on the 78. The transmission, we got it back away from the engine, and turns out that that's not the problem. Everything is still not turning on the motor. So now we're going to go ahead, and we got the hood off. We're going to pull the motor out, get it bolted onto the stand, see what's going on in there. This thing never did heat up, and it's a new build, so we're not sure what happened, but we're going to start disassembling it once we get it on the stand and see if we can figure it out. Well, motor is just about out here. Got to lower the truck down, and it was a little too high to get it lifted up all the way there. So get that thing on the stand here shortly and see what we see under the valve cover and the oil pans. So getting the torque converter off with the engine seized is lots of fun. You can barely get in there to get those nuts off, but they're coming. We're down to 2. Well, I got the torque converter off. That was painful, but it's doable if you ever have that issue. We'll slide that thing back into the transmission there in a little bit, and get this flywheel off now. Okay, well, engine's on the stand. We're going to start with draining the oil out, and then we're going to pull the valve covers off, see if there's anything we can see up top first, and go from there. If we can't see anything up top, we will roll it over, pull the pan off, and see what we can see. Really hoping it's a push rod come out of place and got jammed in there somewhere, because being a new engine, I just can't see what else would have caused this issue, so I guess we're about to find out. Well, no missing push rods, everything's good there. We have had trouble with this engine dropping or bending push rods just due to bad gas, but everything's good. So now we're going to flip it over and take the pan off, see what we can see there. Well, let's have a look-see. Oh my. We have a bunch of debris right here. Not sure what that is, but not good. Quite a bit of debris in the suction. We're gonna do some investigating, see what this pile of junk is from here. So we got a hot journal here on the for these two connecting rods. All the other ones got nice coating of oil on them still. And yeah, so we got to figure out why oil isn't getting to that journal. I'm not really sure what's going on there. Well, we got 3 rod sets loosened off here and still won't turn, so we're gonna get that oil pump out of the way. Take that those last 2 connecting rods loosened off and see if we can't see what's going on, but definitely here we've got bearing material sticking out. So we're sure that that's our issue in that journal. Well, we got the engine unseized. Definitely lost oil to the center journal here on the crank for some reason, so we're not sure if it spun a bearing or what, but this crank was just all machined, so we're not really sure why that happened. We can do a little more investigating once we get it out, but this crank is junk and definitely a couple rods are no good. But we got another engine that we can rob some parts out of, so once we get that one out, we will rob some parts and get this guy back together. Thanks for watching, guys.